All right, so Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته ومنتهى علمه من جمع ما شاء وخلق وضرع وبرع عالم الغيب شهادة الرحمن الرحيم المالك القدوس العزيز الحكيم وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك له الحمد يحيي ويميت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وحبيبه وخليله وأرسله بهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله لو كرهت المشركين ومن بعد. So we are going to discuss somewhat the Hadith of Jabreel, what's been nicknamed the Hadith of Jabreel. This what's been nicknamed the Hadith of Jabreel. This hadith is not only is it sahih, but it's a hadith that is sahih with the highest level of authenticity, meaning that it's mutawatir, that has been witnessed by so many different routes that it's impossible for it to be a lie. Like, for instance, anybody here ever been to China? But everybody agrees that China exists? Would anybody deny China exists? And usually because it's the overwhelming evidences of proof, or people that visited there or people that lived there and can give you signs or some sort of proof that China exists, we all know and testify that China exists. Well, it's the same thing with a Tawatir hadith, right? And mutawatir hadith, they play a very significant role in Islam and within dealing with evidences and things of that nature, right? So while I'm sitting here doing this, I'm still digging up something else. So that's why I seem a little off and not totally here with you, but I am. So anyway, a mutawatir hadith can affect the way a rule is given in Islam. Like, for instance, when you have to make wudu and you wash your feet, where's the command in that? Where does that command come from? It comes from the Quran, right? But why do we wipe over leather socks? It's sunnah, but now the argument will come is, well, this is an ayat of the Quran, and this is a hadith. Can a hadith abrogate an ayat? That would become the discussion. So, however, it is, you can wipe over leather socks when you have them on, and of course there's certain conditions to them that have to be fulfilled, but this is because there's an ayat. It's an ayat of the Quran. This is why it's permitted. I mean, not ayat, I'm sorry, a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. This is why it is. And not only is just any old hadith, it was a hadith witnessed by over 80-something Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, right? Over 80-something companions. So this is why. So a mutawatir hadith, right? What it does is it places at its higher form, and a mutawatir hadith is at the same level as the ayat of the Quran, because the Quran is mutawatir, all right? So underneath that, then you have what is known as mashhur, right? More famous hadith, which has about 4 routes, from 4 different narrators, possibly through each generation or more spreads. Then after that, you have mashhur. The three narrated hadith. It's not coming to me right now. I know Aziz is one narrator. So it breaks it on down to his, my whole purpose wasn't to give a class on Mustalah Hadith, so that's why I'm a little rusty. Usually I take the advice of Sheikh Abdullahi Dafodio, where he says when you go into a debate or if you're going into a dars, you prepare. So, preparation for something isn't an obligation upon you until you're ready to engage in it. This portion of the discussion wasn't really my proportion, so I'm giving my way out, my exit sign to the left, right? So anyway, but it changes, the hadith, it changes. But this is for the scholars, the fuqaha, where they tell you how to apply the particular ruling, or how to apply that particular hadith, or which hadith to apply, which hadith is not, important to apply, and so on and so forth. So, but I mention this to show you the importance of this particular hadith. Now, with the Hadith of Jabreel, it was also a hadith that is mutaakhir. It's one of the latter hadiths, as the Prophet ﷺ was approaching death, right? And also this narration, when you hear this narration, it took, some say it was up to 3 days that this narration took place. And, and from this same hadith, you learn a lot of different things. You learn etiquette, adab, you also see that you knew that this person who was questioning the Prophet ﷺ, he had to be somebody of importance, right? Also, this hadith, you can tell it was a latter hadith, meaning it was getting time for the Prophet ﷺ to depart, because it was more so like a teaching instructions type of hadith. It was kind of like fine-tuning your methodology. When you look at many of the books that are written by the Maliki ulama, right, let's take 2 books. I'll give 2 books. First book is Umdatul Bayan, right, by Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio. You take the second book, let's take the second book, Murshid al-Mu'in by Ibn Ashur. When you look at these 2 books and compare them parallel and put them next to each other, what you find is usually in the first section is Iman, right? Belief. The second section you find is Islam, right? Basically more like mu'amilat, what do you practice? The third section that you find is Ihsan, right? Ihsan. And that's more so dealing with tasawwuf, right? Personal character or internal heart development, right? What you'll find with each of them, that's what you find in each of them. And one of the things that one of my teachers mentioned, he said that was always like the mark of the Maliki ulama. That was always the mark of the Maliki scholars. That when they wrote books, like, because usually you look at a lot of books for the various madhahibs, when they write a fiqh book, their book is just dealing with water all the way down to jihad, if they go that far, right? And all the rules connected to it. They don't deal with tasawwuf, they don't deal with aqidah, and none of that. Usually they write books of aqidah separately, right? And I always mention this, and I think, because I'm starting to think in a different pattern. One of the most famous books for the English-speaking Muslim, especially in America, is Aqidah Tahawi. And Aqidah Tahawi was written, Imam Tahawi, he was a Hanafi, right? His father, his parents, his family used to be Shafi'i, and he later switched over to Hanafi madhab. Now, my point of focusing on Tahawi, the big source of our fitna in our community is centered around who's teaching Aqidah Tahawi. Everybody makes a claim to it. Salafis make a claim to it. Ahl Sunnah make a claim to it. There's all kinds of other books of Aqidah, but for some reason, that book has always been narrowed down and shared between the 2 communities, and they keep the fight going between the 2 by using that one book. Barely even fight over the Quran like that. We all share the Quran, correct? Barely fight over the Quran like that, but when it comes to Tahawi, everybody's always fighting. I think it's point number 36. Allah is not contained by 6 directions. They give their own explanation of it, right? Ahl Sunnah explains it. That's where the fight begins at, right? So my point, in case of point of mentioning this, is that we've somewhere drifted and parted away from how things used to be by the Muslims. Now, there's nobody and nowhere has ever been a promise that there will never be Muslims will never argue. Muslims never have debates. Nobody's ever promised that. Matter of fact, the Prophet ﷺ made dua for these things in the hadith, and he was denied. He was denied of that aspect, that there'll never be no bloodshed in the ummah, right? One of the things that the Prophet ﷺ said is that my ummah will never agree on an error. So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said this, that you'll know there'll be differences, in particular subjects. It happened right after his death. The first thing that happened after the death of the Prophet ﷺ was that the Muslims didn't want to pay zakat. First big rift in the ummah. Matter of fact, the believers that were under the Khilafah Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, they were a bit reluctant and hesitant when he said, yeah, we're going to fight them. If they give a quarter dinar less than what they gave me during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we will fight them. So that was already the first door opening for that, for that type of fitna, because once you take away the figurehead, things always change, right? Especially when you bring in younger people. When you bring in younger people, they usually develop a way where they break away from the rest of the ummah, right? Or break away from the main body. And I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, where you'll find within a society or a community, you'll have people that are holding on to the foundational teachings, right? You also have that same thing. I mentioned this book yesterday, even within our Jama'at with Sheikh Uthman Danfodio. He mentioned before his death, he had a dream about what they called the Zaman al-Nasara, the hour of the Christian, where the Europeans will invade. And he mentioned that it will be 100 years before the Ahlul Rum. That's what we used to call them, Ahlul Rum, the Roman people, before they enter into our lands where Islam was established. When they entered into those lands, things started to change. The first thing they did was they made a promise. They said to the people there in Hausa land, said, listen, we're not going to change your religion. We don't want to change anything about you guys. We're here to make it better for you. We're here to help, right? It's like Shaitan. That's what Shaitan told Adam, right? I'm just a fair warning to you. It's not that Allah don't want you to eat from the tree. He just, just don't go that way. Then when they oral started to become exposed to him, they knew he was lying, right? So they promised him. They said, look, we're just trying to make things better. So one of the first mandates that they did was that they made them close all their madrasas, because none of the people were sending their children to the schools of the kuffar. So the first thing they went after was their children in being involved in madrasas. The second thing they went after was they made them stop using Arabic language and made them use English. So those two things, one, your madrasa is the very last thing that you have, right? You have that very last thing, even if you're thinking on a military basis, whatever the case is, that is the very last thing you're holding on to of Islamic culture. And most of our communities don't flourish because we don't take education serious. That's why it never flourishes. It only gets to this point and then it falls off immediately. And most of us, some of our studies is centered around studying controversy to the point we can't exist outside of controversy. If you took away all of the arguments that Muslims have, whether, about praying Sadl, whether the Qibla's northeast, southeast, Istiwa, all these things, Sibha versus non-Sibha, Maulid, and things like that, Muslims will be irrelevant to each other. We'll be cool. We'll be slapping high five. Hey, man, it's my man. We go to the same masjid. I don't agree with him, but we all right. Right? This is what will happen. But the fact that these things they're not just taught. They're drilled in you like it's part of your Aqidah. There's a little book of Aqidah that they sell here in the city. The majority of the book is from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. I mean, not majority, but the book is from Ahl Sunnah. But the one thing I always avoid about this book is because in there, the book is preparing you to argue with Salafis without even having to say their name. One of the first things that they talk about in there is about tawassul, all right? Tawassul is one of the things, if you ever want to send a Salafi over the roof, you start talking about tawassul, it'll make him lose his mind, right? He'll be like, no, there's no way, no, we can't do tawassul, no. He'll go crazy. But at the same time, they accuse Muslims who practice tawassul, which was taught by the Prophet ﷺ, accuse them of committing shirk. They'd be like, no, you committing shirk, you committing shirk, you committing shirk. Now, there's some things you can call another Muslim And you might get a reaction like, man, I really don't like this dude, but I'm gonna keep my distance from him. But if you keep calling a Muslim a mushrik, eventually you gonna get hands, feet, paws, everything is gonna happen. So these things are kind of like, like words to trigger, to trigger people. And so people are very well versed in these things. When you start talking about Hadith of Jabreel and things like this, people used to talk about Hadiths being Sahih and things like this, but most people haven't completed memorizing. We're not even talking about memorization, just reading the Automatic Nawawi. They can't even use it as a reference point. And the book, the compilation of the 40 Hadiths is supposed to be the Hadiths that you need as a Muslim, right? Books like the Muwatta stress us out. We're going cardiac arrest because it's just too many narrations in there. Like, look, man, it's just too much, So, these little pamphlets that they're putting out is what everybody's being educated off of. These YouTube videos that are extremely controversial is what everybody's being educated off of, right? Most of our controversies that come in our families is because of some kind of conversation on social media, or one of their friends has experienced this thing, and you feel a type of way about it, and so you're on alert. Right? So then what happens, we start to do our grouping thing, our categorizing, throwing everybody in the same pot. So we develop that type of mentality. And so then what happens is we can't get nothing done as an ummah, right? So the safest route, the only thing that you have left now, the only hope for most of us is to return back to the concept of Jama'ah, because most Muslims are leaderless. They're running around without a leader. When you have a leader, there's a lot of things that happens under a leader. The leader is responsible and charged for making sure the people under his flock is educated. The same way that the husband is charged for that, right? The husband is responsible to making sure that their women and children are educated. When we neglect on that end, then what happens is our families fail. Now, it used to be the concept, and it used to be taught. I was a firm believer until 25 years of being Muslim, and I still haven't seen too much come out of it, where they be like, oh, if you educate the woman, you educate the whole village. I haven't seen it happen yet. We've been educating sisters, and the only thing that's been happening is they found more ways to get divorced, or more ways not to cover properly, or more ways not to come to the masjid, and how their children could still get Christmas gifts and things of this nature and still be considered Muslim. I haven't seen it. And it's not their fault in totality, because they trust most of these preachers, imams or whatever they are, teaching them, the woman's right. We're going to empower women, right? And most women that gets empowered by most of these leaders are usually, they have a long legacy of being lonely and never having a husband. They have a long legacy. And so meanwhile, the joker who need to be cleaned up is actually the man. And be honest with you, if you subtly watch what Malcolm did with the nation when he was part of the nation, a lot of their focus was on the men. You tell them, you got to be a father, you got to be this, but you turn the focus away from the men and expect the men to already know this, but you can't expect a man to be a man if he never had a man in his life, right? So they turn him away, expect him to grow up to be this man without any instruction. He's just supposed to learn through observation, I guess, right? Or just learn through, whatever experiences in life he has, and boom, he just becomes this right man. Then he gets married. Most men usually when they get married, because they haven't really changed themselves, they're really governing their households based off of what they know how to do best. And the same thing, vice versa. And so then they develop what? MGT, Muslim girls training. And started training them to be, for them to be women. I'm not here to glorify them or anything of that nature, but if you want to make a change, a societal change, or just a change, even if it's just a small group, you want to make a change, then that change has to begin with education. That's the last leg it falls on, right? Like if you take away, if you were to collapse the white supremacist system, I think the last thing to go would be the Constitution. Then white supremacy wouldn't reign supreme no more. That's the very last thing that they're holding on to. So in relation to everything that I just mentioned, in relation to the Hadith of Jabreel, there's a lot of connection to it, because this is during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. This hadith is being narrated during the latter part of his life when he's about to die. So usually when a leader, or even a father, a father with a large family or whatever the case is, when the head of the family, head of the household, head of the society is about to part, they usually leave people with some kind of instructions, all right? They usually leave people instructions, parting instructions. Sometimes we die, we don't have no instructions. Matter of fact, we don't even have a will, right? We just leave it haywire. We're like, yo, he died, that's it, khalas, okay? One of the best and beautiful examples that I love is about Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio was that the Shehu, like Abu Bakr Siddiq, like Umar ibn Khattab, like Uthman ibn Affan, right, and many of the Sahabas, it was an entire family involved in Islam. An entire family involved in Islam. It wasn't just this wife, and maybe not that one wasn't part of, or this person was part of, and she didn't like the imam, so she don't go there. It was an entire family. Think about it, right? I was gonna go over this yesterday, but I might try to do this later. I got a picture, like a diagram of the Prophet ﷺ and all of his children and which families he intermarried into amongst his companions, right? And the beautiful thing was everybody that was around him was not only were they brothers in Islam, but they were actually related, whether by actual, through blood or through marriage. Ali was the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. Everybody know that, right? Who was Ali's wife? Fatima. Who was Fatima? She was the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. So Ali was his son-in-law. Uthman had the nickname of Dhul Nurayn. Dhul Nurayn. Anybody know what that means? The possessor of two lights. Nur, Nurayn, two lights, right? Why did they call him the possessor of two lights? He was married to the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, not just one, but two. One died and he married the other one, right? Omar was the father-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ. He married Hafsa. Abu Bakr was the father-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ. He married Aisha, right? So here it is. You had this family tree. You had this family, and not only were they close companions, but they were family. They were family, and so the Shehu, he himself also had 4 wives, and his entire family was part of the mission. His wives would be the teachers to the younger women. They would go outside because they lived in the village. And usually the village and city life, there's usually a little bit more education. I don't know what's happening in our time, with our cities and things, but there's a little more educations and things that people in the city had over people that lived in the rural areas. People in the rural areas didn't have too much of anything, but they were outside of the city. So Nana Ismail, who's the daughter of Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio, was one of the daughters, and she was really actively engaged in, learning and dawah and things like this, right? She used to, her father, he would go out, he would teach, he would, earn his money. He was basically an entrepreneur. He would sell rope. While he was in the masjid teaching, he would braid up, tie up rope, and then after class was over, he would go out to the market, make his money, and by time at the end of Isha, he would listen, have Nana Ismail review and listen to her recitation of Quran. Nana Ismail had a different mother from Muhammad Bello. Muhammad Bello was also a son of Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio. Muhammad Bello was the first Amir al-Mu'mineen after Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio after he resigned. Muhammad Bello's mother died when he was a young boy. The next person that took responsibility for raising him was one of his other wives, right? So, the family seen the bigger mission, right? They seen the greater mission. The mission was to establish deen. One of the first people to give bay'ah to Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio was his brother Abdullah Dan Fodio, right? His brother, not only was that his younger brother, and they weren't that far apart in age. They were probably about, 5 years apart from each other, all right? They weren't that far apart in age, but he was not only was his first teacher, he taught him, right? Their father taught Sheikh Uthman and Fodia. Their father also taught Abdullahi Quran as well. You know, and I was looking over this morning because actually the portion of the talk I was actually going to talk about was really this, and then we was going to talk about Sanad and Isnad, and you know, the other brother was going to talk about the Hadith in detail. So anyway, so my point of mentioning all this is connect the dots. There was a learning process going on. And with learning in Dawah, because we kind of like made Dawah corporate now, right? With pamphlets, we got to have these big old, you know, bazaars and hand out, you know, these pamphlets. Like basically what you would say is already scripted for you, right? It's scripted for you. It's the same way when you, you know, it's like it's handed to you. Like most of the khutbahs, when something catastrophic happens on the news, correct me if I'm wrong, almost every imam is talking about the same exact thing, as if somebody wrote the khutbah for him and handed it to him. Like, hey, man, you're going to talk about this today, you know. The building fell down, that's what we're going to talk about, all right? Somebody shot up a school, all right, that's what we're going to talk about. So every time you turn around, there's something going on. Now, you would think that things weren't happening in you know, in areas when you read in history about Islam, but the focus of everything is about establishing deen and learning deen. So things do happen, things go on. But however, so you had this system. It was a system that never broke down. So it didn't always just turn on to, because with us, with black people, my people, I love you, but we got this thing when it comes to our children and somebody else helping us with our children, especially our women, right? If there's a father that has custody of their children, everybody's like, where's the father, right? Me, I had custody of my oldest sons, and when I used to register in the school, women would look at me like, well, where's their mother? Like, why are you worried about their mom? Where's their mother, you know? And that's how they would kind of like treat me. Like, you know, you weren't supposed to be registering in school. We're expecting women to do it. Now, I understand, yes, society, you know, men work, supposed to be working. Women usually take those things kind of more serious and all that. But it's a stereotype nonetheless, and sometimes it affects the father to the point he doesn't really, he's not really actively engaged as he should be and take more of a role the way he should be, right? He usually takes a back seat. And when he takes a back seat, what happens? He's a bit more off to the side. And so what does that do with the perspective of the young man or the young female with male leadership? Do you think they'll respect male leadership unconditionally? No. It usually has an effect on them, you know? So, you know, the role of men, I believe, me personally, I believe you build a man, you change society. You build a man, you change society. I used to believe that you educate the woman, you change society. Well, while everybody off, all the men was off working and doing everything else, all the sisters was going to the classes, and sad to say, I haven't seen that much of a change. So we have to kind of like restructure things. This is what leadership does. They look at things, they're like, oh, wait a minute, this ain't working. Let's tweak this a little bit and try this. Of course, you always get flack from people, well, I don't agree, I don't like this, and I don't think this is good, and this, that, and the third. You have to be able to have that kind of vision for your family to see that. Sometimes you have to make it. If you look at one group of ethnicity, one ethnic group in America, that when they come here, they're not from here. You know they're not from here. But one of the things they always build is, and it's their trademark. Nobody else has the same trademark. Anybody ever heard of this term called Dar Ulum? Dar Ulum? Translated in English, it means like the place of the science. Dar Ulum, or the knowledges, right? Dar Ulum is a school, a madrasa system. And the madrasa system, I had the opportunity to attend the Dar Ulum as well. The madrasa system is that usually they take children probably from the age of 5 on up until high school age, or they finish memorizing the Quran, right? And I believe that this is why the media was vilifying Quran schools. Now, I'm not saying that some of the people, their behavior towards children is on point, but I believe that that's why they zeroed in on that. Like, even like, if you ever watched that movie Muslim, that's probably one of the worst movies you could probably put in your household, because it breaks the trust of the children for Islam. and it splits the father and the mother. It splits them down the middle. And honestly, it's almost the American reality, the Black American reality, if you ever watched that movie. But anyway, so the Darul Uloom, they teach the children Quran and Arabic and so on and so forth. They go in, they learn one of the primer books called Al-Qaeda, right? Which I find it funny that they name a terrorist group Al-Qaeda, right? Al-Qaeda is Qaeda, and Qaeda is a book, a little book where you learn Aleph, Ba, Ta, Tha, Jim, Ha, Kha, right? And then the other group that they have is Taliban, right? Now, anybody knows Sarf, if you study Sarf with me, Taliban means 2 students. Right, Taliban would have probably been a little bit more appropriate, but whatever. That's the case. That's neither here nor there. So the child goes in, and he stays. Some children live there. They have places where the children can live there, where they lodge at. They live there, and basically all they do all day, sun up, sundown, is memorize Quran. Now, before everybody's mind get to thinking, well, what about the white supremacist education we need? I mean, what about math and English and all those things, right? They learn that too. They do homeschool. They actually, homeschool the child while they're there. So they learn, but from sun up, sundown, that's all they do, memorize Quran. They have little drills, right, where they'll have some of the senior teenage students call the adhan, right? And the little kids, it's training them, same way you would have some kind of training, when you hear the alarm, you get up. So they get up and they line up for rows in Salat, right? And it's funny, little kids, and they go home every Friday. They go home every Friday night, and they come back every Friday, and their parents, they send them back, and their parents, kind of dress them up in regular street clothes when they go back. It's like the madrasa, you got your uniform there. So, and I remember one of the teachers there, because I asked them, and where I got the idea to do everything that I'm doing now was from a lot of them having, consulted them, because one of the things that they told me is that, look, we can't educate your people. You learn and go back and educate your people. We can't do it. We have to, we worry about our own people. We don't understand your culture. We don't understand you. But we all are Muslim, and Islam is what it is, and that's, basically like that's the focus. So anyway, so all of the children, they would they would have the children line up for the salat. And so one of the things that with the younger children that they would do was that if they had pants that was dragging past their ankles, they had these big sheer looking clippers that they line the kids up and they cut their pants, and they tell their parents, like, look, don't send them back here with these pants. You don't want us to cut them, don't send them here with them. Right? And so then what they would do is that they were setting the mind frame and the mentality, okay? The mind frame and the mentality for the children to dress a particular way, have a particular look, have all these things. If you ever watch them that come from that cultural background, one thing that I always see about them that I don't see with a lot of people, you ever heard of the term called namaz? You ever heard, if you read their books, if you read a lot of their books, it had namaz. You look on their prayer schedule, it have namaz on there, right? So anyway, so they're trained from a kid that you pray sunnah prayers as if it's part of the regular salat, okay? If you ever notice with them, when they pray the masjid, even at home, right? When they believe they got to make up prayers, it's taught in their fiqh. They believe they got to make up prayers. They make up their sunnah prayers along with their prayers, right? That's why I'm mentioning this. It's ingrained in them. We don't have a set program ingrained in our children. Sometimes they see daddy pray, tahajjud. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they see mommy wear full veil. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they see us, eat halal. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes we don't get a birthday party. Sometimes they do. You see, what it does is it creates this kind of like a split personality, right? Split personality. Family and Islam go hand in hand. Family, Islam, Jamaat, they're everything. When you put that responsibility on the leadership, the leader is responsible for a few things, even the men. The focus, a lot of our focus has to be on rebuilding and reestablishing the Muslim males. Building and reestablishing the Muslim males. You have to. Women's contribution to Islam, excellent. When you talk about hadiths, matter of fact, in our madhab, in the Muwatta, I think we got 4 female narrators. There ain't too many people narrate from the route of women. There's not too many people that narrate from that particular route. So, you have to build this thing up. You have to build it up. But guess what? One of the narrators, their route, it comes through Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. What did the Prophet ﷺ say about Aisha? He said, Nisful deen min Aisha, right? Half of the deen is going to come from Aisha, right? So it's not that you're excluding them. In our women learning doesn't mean we have to put them on the front line. A lot of their teaching they did was always behind closed doors or with other women, right? I don't feel too confident with a lot of our sisters today because it goes from, learning and then it just turns into something else, right? We can socialize. Once we mature enough, we'll be able to separate socializing and learning and keep the two of them, separate and not get, start personal. Because also another thing is some of our women are too secluded to the point that when they come out, they don't know how to express, they don't know how to act. They want to tell everything that goes on in their home. Yeah, my husband, he's a fool. I hate him. Because that's all she knows is him and in the house with the children. So when she comes out, she don't know what to talk about. We have to have Islam inside and outside the homes. Family and Islam all go hand in hand. Now, the Shehu, Omar, all of his sons was involved with the deen. All of his children. Same thing with Uthman. Same thing with Ali, right? Same thing with Abu Bakr. All of his children. Matter of fact, one of his daughters was married to, I believe it was Ibn Sirin. Or she's a descendant, the child, Ibn Sirin is a descendant of her, which is Asma. Because Abu Bakr, he used to be able to, he had a strong ability of being able to interpret dreams. And his daughter Asma, she had that same ability to interpret dreams. And I believe it was Ibn Sirin. I think he's either her son or he was married to somebody that's related to her. He also had that same ability. That's what he was famous for, Ibn Sirin. He's known for being able to interpret dreams. Matter of fact, Ibn Sirin was the one who interpreted Imam Malik's dream that his madhab will be in the West. He's the one who interpreted that for Imam Malik. Imam Malik had the dream, about the adhan being called from the West and everything like that. And he said his madhab will be strong in the West. Whether that means us or is that talking about the Maghrib? I don't think it just stops at the Maghrib, meaning Northwest Africa. I think it's talking about us too, right? But anyway, all of this is, and I can't emphasize it enough, all of it is connected to family. But with family has to be education, and then entertainment, right? Yeah, because that brings about a balance, right? So anyway, within our methodology and what we teach our families should always be a heavy emphasis on Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. Iman, Islam, and Ihsan, right? I had planned on it, but I'll probably do it at a later date where we will go through this hadith, right? Because we're always teaching this hadith, but what I'll do is I'll go through it, at a later date and give you all Senate from myself, all the way back to Shaykh Uthman and Fodio, all the way back to Imam Bukhari, all the way back to Imam Muslim, right? At least with that particular hadith, because a traditional method of hadith was that you would go to a circle, you would write down the hadith, memorize it with this chain, and then your teacher would will give you basically that connection with that hadith. All of the stuff that people are doing today, that is not tradition. Have you waiting 10,000 years, listen, you 25 years before you get ijazah, and so on and so forth. Yes, Imam Malik studied with 700 teachers. Think about it. Imam Malik wasn't 700 years old. He had over 700 teachers in Medina. How long do you think he stayed with each and every one of them? It's only 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, 30 days in a month, right? So a lot of times we look at things unrealistically. You look at it like Superman. There's particular things he learned from that teacher. Once he utilized that teacher and learned it up, he went to the next one. And he utilized that, he went to the next one. But there were main teachers that influenced him. The same way that you'll find with Sheikh Uthman and Fodio, his main teachers, he had two primary teachers that influenced his dawah. One was Sheikh Muhammad Murtada, right? And the second one was Sheikh Abu Amina Jabreel, right? Sheikh Omar Jabreel. He was the second one. The two of them molded the Sheikh to who he was. But if you read about who they learned from, you'll see that they had many teachers within the village. So within that village, and this is why it's always encouraged to have Medina. You can't have Medina and preserve knowledge unless you have Medina. Medina was what it was because of the preservation of knowledge there. Not because they had an extensive library, but because all of those people of knowledge were right there in that same city. And that's what makes the city grows, right? That's what preserves the knowledge. And when you went to Iraq, right? And I challenge you, look it up, Islamic history. Places were known for knowledge. Cities were known because of their knowledge. People will go and visit one place, they'll go visit another place, and they'll go visit another place. They'll learn here. This is why you have a difference between Iraq and Medina. The Hijaz was different. You even had a difference between Mecca and Medina. They were two different. They were on two different paths, not in totality, but because of that Sahaba that was there. Whatever Sahaba was there and disseminated knowledge there to those Tabi'i, that's where that knowledge stayed and it permeated. What we have now is we have a mentality that has been influenced by our supremacist handlers, right? We love Yale because Yale is an Ivy League school. If you got a scholarship to go to Yale, everybody's expecting you to come back extremely intelligent. Islamically, usually the place that we look for to study is the place that's going to bring us closest to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? They be like, listen, they got the shortest chain back to Rasulullah. This is where where the last place he was, and that's how they thought about Medina. In Iraq, it was only certain individuals that people beat the whole earth for just to come to study with them. Abu Hanifa was one of them, right? There was certain people, things were restricted. And so this concept it exists with a village mentality type of concept. It's a village mentality. So when you come to the area, they like, yo, listen, this is the curriculum. You'll be surprised that most places, a true curriculum is really only centered around one or two books. Like if you look at the development of the Maliki madhab, it was only two books that the madhab is really surrounded by. Everything else just became writings based off of that, try to either to condense it in a summarization, learn it where they can learn it a little bit faster, but you still got to go back to those books. Or, they were extracting because some of the information, there was too much information that wasn't being utilized in that particular region, right? But it was only two books. Anybody know what those two books are? Muwatta is one of them. What's the other one? Nope. Mudawwana. That was it. The Mudawwana is the direct statements of Imam Malik, and the Muwatta is the direct compilation of hadith coming from Imam Malik. That's your university. That's your entire university. People will go in there and learn. You had men that were very talented, like Ibn Abi Zayd, and he made the Risala, and the Risala is nothing but a mukhtasar, a condensed version of the Muwatta and the Mudawwana. It's a condensed version. And so every book took that same approach. Now, the Akhdari, anybody knows the complete name of the Akhdari? It's called a Mukhtasar al-Akhdari al-Madhhab al-Malik. What's taught in the Akhdari? It's only really two subjects in the Akhdari. Salat and Aqidah, Adab. That's it, it's only two. He said the entire Madhhab of Malik was according to the principles of Malik. The Madhhab was always preserved from person to person. It was never preserved, you wrote a whole book. It was taken from person to person. Al-Izziyah. Y'all familiar with that book, Al-Izziyah? Al-Izziyah is a book that they use a lot, especially in northern Nigeria. Al-Izziyah is a book that is kind of like the bridge to the Risala for you to understand the Risala better. Al-Izziyah, the book in itself, the author of the book, his name is Abu Hassan Muhammad al-Shadhili, right? Al-Izziyah. Now, Muhammad, Sheikh Shadhili, he's not the Sufi Imam Shadhili, right? He's an Azhari graduate. And guess what? That book, why is it called Al-Izziyah? Anybody know the history behind that? Because Al-Iz was where he was from. It was a village in Egypt. And he wrote the book for his village. So, the contribution that scholars put, they didn't worry about the entire world. They only worry about those who were right there in front of them in their proximity. So this is something that is also extremely important. Okay, we get to it. That, you know, the authors, the teachers, the writers, they're writing to people that, you know, they have some sort of connection, right? There's some sort of trust there. Part of knowledge is a manner. It's a trust. There's trust. There's a level of trust that has to be there. And when you have that level of trust there, when somebody's taking something from you, then they trust that it's the truth. Well, you're living in a city of mistrust. Because everything that somebody takes, like, man, I don't know about that, right? Somebody will tell you who not to listen to more than they can tell you where to go to learn from. People have no way. If it ain't they spot where they go, they don't know where to go. They be like, I don't know. So usually what happens as a result of that, you have plenty of people that are outside of the communities that don't know anything about Islam, but they're creating their own type of Islam as you go, right? So they're creating Islam as they go. They don't have a methodology. The people in the masajid don't have a methodology. What people teach them? Everybody usually learn the same books, the 3 fundamentals of Islam, right? Muhammad Abdul Wahhab's books. Even people who don't claim to be Salafi, everybody learns those books. They be like, well, what's Tawheed? 3 categories of Tawheed: Uluhiyyah, Rububiyyah, Asma wa Sifat. Right? That has nothing to do with Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Actually, the originator of that is Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah took and made he made his own analogy, because Imam Tahawi goes back to Tahawi. I'm telling you, I'm on to something. Y'all don't believe me. Y'all probably think I'm crazy right now because that book is popular. Everybody loves it. It's hot. People will probably refute me like I just said that the Quran isn't the Quran, right? He used Tahawi because Imam Tahawi made a statement in there about Allah's rububiyyah. And so then he added on the other 2 categories, rububiyyah, uluhiyyah, and asma wa sifat, right? There's a 4th category that's attributed to Uthaymeen and Bin Baz and them guys, and this is where your terrorist cells come from, Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, right? So what did they do? They separated church and state, because Hakimiyyah is about Tawheed, but astaghfirullah, I hate to say it like this, but it's a political Tawheed, meaning that's Allah and Allah's Tawheed, because they separate the Quran. And so you have many Muslims that say, yeah, well, we don't have to. We could be democratic Muslims, right? A Muslim means that everything in the Quran is what you follow. Everything. That's your law. And those things that happen to fall in line and conform with things that the kuffar practice, then that's what it is. It just happens to conform with them. Not that we shape and mold our Islam based on their lifestyles or based on what they believe or anything of that nature. So this type of, we've all come from that background, most of us. We've been in touch with all that stuff. It's time for us to start thinking new and move forward. This is why our concept, I even moved away from the whole philosophy. We embrace all 4 madhabs. Yes, we believe that they're all a path to guidance. Yes, we do, absolutely. But there's only one truth, as Imam Malik says. Bottom line. Is it our job to tell you if somebody's wrong in this madhab and that? That's not our concern. Our concern is following that thing that's going to put us on the path of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what it is. A lot of confusion used to come from that. Because why? Because many of us, we're kind of like mufti of shahwat, right? We're the mufti of our desires. So what we'll do, you can get, if you were an all 4 madhab practitioner, and even if the men of the madhabs even forbid these type of practices, you can get married without people. You can get married. You take every madhab and basically like make you a wife. You know how you got avatars? You can put your hair on them. You make them with muscles. Like, you can play basketball. You can make them a boxer, whatever you want to make them. These avatars, you can do the same thing. You can get a person. You'll find one position that the person don't have to present a mahar, right, up front. Okay, cool. All right, I see this woman. I like her. I ain't got to get the mahar right now. I can get it later, right? I don't need a wali. Y'all know where that's at. Well, we don't need the witnesses present. I just have to inform the witnesses before we consummate. So you took away the witnesses, you took away the dowry, you took away everything, and basically all you have is a man and woman there saying, "I'm married to you, my wife now." This is why you can't follow four madhabs. Madhabs are law, and we have to respect it as that too. It's also another thing, we don't look at it as law. We don't approach the Quran and Sunnah as law. Does anybody know what the what is it called, the Black Book of Law? You know what that black book is about? Huh? No. This Black Book of Law is basically one of the books that that lawyers use. Lawyers use that, right? Huh? The little black book, yeah, they use that. Every lawyer uses that. And they also use what? Appellate books. That black book is almost like their Quran. The appellate books is like their Hadith. And so then what they do is they go off of other cases, old cases in the past, and they'll pull a case out. They see a similarity between your case and their case. Of course, for some other references, they make their reference back to so. If I get locked up today or tomorrow, I'm not going in the lawyer's office and arguing with him about, about anything pertaining to the case. You're going to refer to him as specialty, and you have a particular, no, not case law, but people have a particular aura pertaining to the law and the Constitution. They come in, we don't approach the Quran with that same thing. We kind of like treat the Quran like it's like next to nothing. We don't read it. We don't know really much about it. You can't tell anything about it. Some of the smaller signs where you find a person that knows something about the Quran, the first sign is that they usually read it. All right? They can tell you all the names of 114 surahs. All right? If they can't do that, they can at least do half of that, or at least a quarter of that. Some people don't even know other than Fatiha and maybe whatever surah they recite regularly, right? Second level, second tier, you able to at least be able to tell the surah that you're reading, whether it was revealed in Mecca or whether it was revealed in Medina, right? This is how you can tell a lover of Quran. The same way that you can tell if a person loved their particular spouse. They can tell what they like to eat, when they eat it, what time they go to bed. They have their bed laid out for them, had the food laid out for them. It's the same thing with the Quran. If you really, really in love with the Quran, you start to know the asbabul nuzul, why this ayat was revealed, where it was revealed at, who's pertaining to it, right? And then when you just like out of your mind in love, man, you're able to tell everything, and you're able to take all of this and put it and apply it in your life. But many of us are still on the base level where we still getting to know the 114 surahs, right? Some of us don't know how many ayahs is in Surah Baqarah. You see what I'm saying? You start to know things. When you have a love affair and a love connection with someone, you know certain things. These are foundational. The same way that this Hadith of Jabreel is foundational. Now, with this Hadith of Jabreel, this particular hadith is very foundational to us and all of the Muslims in general, because this is our dawah. This is how we call people to the deen. This is a curriculum. This is what you're supposed to teach them. And if you look at it, all of the sciences that you study is centered around these three parts: Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. So I'll read the narration of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It says, "An Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, وقال بين نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم إذا طلع علينا رجل شديد بياد ثواب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد حتى جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه ووضع كفيه على فخذيه." He says, قال وقال يا محمد أخبرني عن الإسلام. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. قال صدقت. فعجبنا له يسأله وصدقه. All right. So we're going to talk about just this portion that I read so far. This hadith is narrated from Umar ibn Khattab. All right. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this riwayah is from Sahih Muslim. Okay? Now, I just want to point this out and connect this to Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio. Sheikh Uthman al Fodio has two books that are very similar, but one gives more detail than the other. We're all familiar with Umdatul Bayan. Umdatul Bayan, the model of Umdatul Bayan is mimicked after the Hadith of Jabreel, but it's from the riwayah out of Sahih Bukhari. Okay? The other book, what is known as Kitab al-Ulum al-Mu'amila, right? The book of the book of behavior, Kitab al-Ulum al-Mu'amila, the sciences of behavior. That book is mimicked after this particular narration, this version of the Hadith. Because in that version of the Hadith, how do you know the mimicking? Two things. There's two things that you'll recognize about them, how they're different, but in their mimic after the Hadith. Umdatul Bayan is mimicked after the version of the Hadith from Bukhari, which is narrated from Abu Huraira. In that Hadith, he starts off by asking, Akhbirni an iman. Inform me what is iman. All right? Here, the first thing that we mentioned here was Akhbirni an Islam. Inform me what is Islam. So, Umdatul Bayan starts off with Aqidah. Right? Kitab al-Ulum al-Mu'amila starts off with fiqh. It starts off with fiqh. And we discussed this before in classes at the masjid, where we talked about the branches of the deen, the foundation of the deen, the usul of the deen is what? Somebody tell me. What's the usul of the deen? The foundation of the deen. You tell me, Hunayf. Huh? What's the usul of the deen? Huh? I can't hear. Aqidah. Now, that's the usul, that's the foundation. Usulul deen. That's why it's called that, right? Aqidah comes from the word i'tiqad, like to tie something up, to make it, to make it tight. So it's also giving reference to that, but sometimes with aqidah, it can be specifying overall the science of Tawheed and including also the science of Ilm al-Kalam, right? Which Aqidah Tahawi is a book of Kalam. It's not a book of Usuluddin. It has Usuluddin in it, but it's Kalam. Because Sheikh Uthman al Fodio, he teaches us that any book of Tawheed that has Kalam in it, that has just one line in Kalam, has tainted the book to become Ilm al-Kalam. Because Ilm al-Kalam was created in order to defend the beliefs of the Muslims from corruption, right? It wasn't permeated for the people to be permeated so they can walk around and be ready. So Ilm al-Kalam, to me, is like learning jiu-jitsu after you learn boxing. Right? You box, you might be able to get out here and shuffle a little bit. If you're strong enough, you might muscle them, beat them up or something like that. But when you get sophisticated and real savvy with your fighting, is you become a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Be able to bend his finger up, break his finger. He ain't want to fight no more. His finger broke. Like, man, look, I ain't trying to fight no more, man. I'm sorry, right? Ideal situation anyway. When you learn all those type of things, you learn about disarming and things of this nature. Well, Ilm al-Kalam is of the same stature. You're not walking around waiting for somebody. As we talked about earlier, remember earlier we made reference and we talked about khufs, wiping over leather socks. Well, Imam Tahawi makes it a point in his book on Aqidah. It makes it a point. Why? Because the Shia, the Rafida, they believe you can't wipe over leather socks. They say, no, I don't have no foundation in the deen, but you have over 70 to 80 different Sahabas who narrated that the Prophet ﷺ wore khufs and wiped over khufs, right? So this is where you see the difference of that. So Akhbirni ana Islam. So anyway, so Umar narrates, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that he said, one day we were sitting with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there appeared before us a man dressed in extremely white clothes and very black hair. Right? So the one thing that I mentioned is this here was pointed out. Scholars such as Ibn Hajar Asqalani, he said about this particular yeah, right. He said about this particular hadith, about this portion of the hadith, that this is the libasa, the libasa to of the talib, of the student, that he should wear white. Right? Now, what's strange, why it's so strange to Umar, Why were they traveling? They were traveling. He was traveling. How are their roads? How's the roads in the desert? Dusty, right? Desert sand. So you wearing something white, it's gonna be tan by the time, off-white, mother of pearl, by the time you get to your destination. So Omar found it strange. Now, how this hadith is narrated, it seems as if he just busts in their circle. Like we're sitting here now, we're having a discussion, somebody just walks in, oh, Khalil, listen, tell me about such and such, such and such. Like, man, hold up, right? It didn't happen just like that. Ibn Hajar Asqalani gives more detail in his Fathul Bari explaining about this particular hadith. So the next thing that Omar mentions in here, he says that he had no traces visible of that he was journeying, on a journey, and none of us knew who he was. We don't even know this guy. Who is he? He shows up in all white. He don't look like he came far to get to us. There weren't no planes back then, so you weren't looking all clean. How you get here, man? Who are you, right? So then Omar said, now the one thing that you got to recognize about the Sahabas, they weren't a people who would I know. You're not a people who they weren't a people who would jump ahead of the Prophet ﷺ and speak before him. So they were kind of like, sitting back, but they won't go. Put it like that. They were kind of like, okay, we don't know this guy. Who is this guy? But we ain't gonna do nothing till the Prophet say something, right? And there was many incidents like that where you seen where the man grabbed the Prophet ﷺ by his shirt and said, yeah, Rasulullah, you need to fear Allah. What was the statement that was made? Ya Rasulullah, let me knock this munafiq's head off his shoulders, right? That was like those kind of things. Even when they first came to Medina, there was the Jews that were there from Bani Qurayza. I forgot the leader's name, but he had insulted the Prophet ﷺ. So Omar, what Omar said to him? He said to the man, he said, had we not had a mutual interest here, I'd have killed you for disrespecting the Prophet ﷺ. It wasn't like a thing like we gonna do it. No, he said it right to his face. He said, other than that, I would have killed you a long time ago, but I'm gonna let you breathe. Right? So don't think for an incident that they were just able to just walk up and just talk to the Prophet any old type of way. It wasn't like that. They were just men that had respect and they didn't make a move unless, was given that order. So then he said that there was no traces of journey on him and none of us knew him. And he sat close by the Prophet ﷺ and rested his knees against his knees and placed his palms over his thighs, over top of his thighs. Now, when I learned this hadith with Muhammad Sharif, he actually narrated to me what they call hadith silsila. There's certain actions in this hadith when it was narrated. We sat knee to knee, and when he explained it to me about where he placed his hands, he said is discussion on whether the hand was actually placed. The Jabreel placed his hand on top of the Prophet ﷺ's leg, or if he placed his own hand on top of his own leg, right? So, but either way, he narrated both. He narrated me this hadith in both, with both practices. So then he said, once he placed his knees up against his knees and placed his palm over his thigh, he said to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "O Muhammad, inform me about Islam." And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ replied, he said, "Islam is that you testify that there's no God except Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger, and that you should perform salat, that you pay zakat, you fast Ramadan, you do hajj to the house, meaning the Kaaba, if you find a way to it, meaning if one has the ability to do so. Otherwise, that's the only thing that lifts the obligation off of you for making hajj, is if you have or if you don't have the ability to make it." So then he said to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "You have spoken the truth." He said, "We were astonished at him questioning the Prophet ﷺ and then telling him he was right." And he went on to say, after that, he went to ask him after that. Now, he said, قال فأخبرني عن الإيمان. قال أن تؤمنوا بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسوله واليوم الآخر وتؤمنوا بقدر وخيره وشره. Right? He said, وقال صدقت. قال فأخبرني عن الإحسان. وقال أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. وقال فأخبرني عن الساعة عن الساعة. وقال ما المسؤول عنها بأعلام بن سائل. قال فأخبرني عن أمرائتها. وقال أن تلد أمات ربناتها فأن ترى فحافة أرات عالة رعاء شياعا يتطاولون في بنيان. ثم انطلق فلبثت مليا ثم قال يا عمر تدري من سائل؟ قلت الله ورسوله أعلم. فقال فإنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. رواه Muslim. So I'll leave you to do the translation. You can finish the rest of the translation. I stopped at Akhbirni Islam. Inshallah.
Oh, I don't even have the hadith off.
That's right.
I don't want you.
Nah, so scroll down.
You want me to translate or just cover the hadith?
You just translate. I just narrate the whole hadith. So you just take it from Akhbirni.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد بن عبد الله عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وبعد. So continue on with this hadith. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this hadith, he talked about 3 issues. The first issue is like the Amir said about Islam, about those things which were individually obligated on everybody and which are exemplified by our practice of fiqh. The second matter that the angel Jabreel alayhi salam, he asked about was Iman. So he had said, Akhbani an al-Iman. And he said, Al-Iman and tu'minu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa tu'minu kutubihi wa rusulihi wa tu'minu bi qadri khayri wa sharri. He said it's to believe in Allah, to believe in His angels, to believe in His books, to believe in His messengers, to believe in the Day of Judgment, and to believe in qadr, which is divine preordainment, the good of it and the bad of it. And as Muslims, we believe that everything that happens is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether that thing is what we consider good or those things which we consider not good or bad. Because in reality, those issues that we consider bad can in reality be something good for us. Because things that happen in a Muslim's life, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for every struggle, every hardship, everything, affliction, every fitna that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests you with, that He either rewards you with some good in this life, He averts some evil things from you in this life, He averts a punishment in the hereafter, or He raises your rank in Al-Jannah. And then the final thing that the angel asked about, alayhi salam, he asked the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Akhbani an al-ihsan. What is purity? And in this case, we mean spiritual purity. He said, and tu'minu, he said that the al-ihsan and, hold on, let me find my place, I'm sorry. فأخبرني عن الإيمان الإحسان أن تعبد الله كأنك يراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. Is to worship Allah as if you see Him. Knowing that we can't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala physically, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees everything that we do. And from this, the scholars point out another hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, لا ينظر الله في أجسامكم وصوركم, that Allah doesn't look to the shape or the form of any of you. وانظر الله إلى قلوبكم, that Allah verily looks to the heart. So what this particular statement of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is pointing to is that we should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our heart, with a pure heart, and removing those things which are blameworthy and will prevent us from worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those spiritual illnesses such as arrogance and conceit and envy and unjust anger and jealousy and hypocrisy and so on and so forth, that we should purify our hearts from those particular matters so that we can worship Allah truly without any type of partition or binder or something preventing us from gaining Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, and that we should replace those things which help us draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as hope and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have sincerity and certainty in our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these things will help us to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now there's a fourth question that the angel asked about, but those things are tied up into the second question. That's, he asks about the Sa'ah, or the Day of Judgment. And we know that from Iman, that the Day of Judgment is something that we have to believe in, and that there's certain signs concerning the Day of Judgment. And so he asked him, he said, inform me of the Day of Judgment. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he responded that the questioner knows no more than the one question. So he asked me, tell me about his signs. He said that when you shall see, and talada ammatuhum rabbatahum, when you see the slave girl give birth to their mistress, meaning that you'll see some people that give birth to people that are going to rule over them later on. That's one interpretation. Or some other scholars say that this means that children will become so haughty and disrespectful of their parents that there will be no regard for the wombs that bore them. And we know that in Islam, this is one of the major sins, is to have disregard or disrespect towards your parents. And he said, when you see the naked, destitute camel herders competing in the building of tall buildings. And if we pay attention to current events, world affairs, we see that in areas such as the Emirates and so on and so forth, even Malaysia and Indonesia, you see people who found wealth. They were, they herded camels and goats, or they lived in, forests and stuff. Now they discovered different natural resources, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with wealth. And what you do is you have one sheikh, he'll build a building, 40 stories, and then somebody else will build one 60 stories. And now, they go back and forth in the community. We see these things happen right before our eyes. And then in the last part of the hadith, the Prophet Muhammad, Umar relating this hadith, he says that ثُمَّ انْطَلَقَ فَلَبِثْتُ مَلَيًّا, and that we stayed sitting for a while. And this malayan means that they sat for a long time. So we see in that particular portion the honor of the Sahaba, that even after this person left, that they sat and waited for the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them some type of understanding of this event that unfolded. So then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Ya Ummah, atadri man as-sa'il? Oh Ummah, do you know who the Messenger of who that person was? Qala Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam, that Allah and His Messenger know best. And we see that the Sahaba, they never rushed to give an opinion or say anything in the presence of the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Instead, they deferred everything to the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that everything that he said was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like Allah says that He doesn't speak of His own hawa, but verily is wahyun yuha, that is something revealed to Him. Qala, and this is the operative portion of the hadith. فَإِنَّهُ جَبْرِيلٌ أَتَاكُمْ يَعَلِمُكُمْ دِينُكُمْ. Verily, that was Jabreel who came to teach you your religion. And this particular revelation or narration of the hadith is the Rawahu Muslim. That verily, that was Jabreel who came to teach you your religion. And in the narration of Bukhari, he says, "Innahu Jabreel atakum ya'alimun nas dinukum." That verily that was Jabreel who came to teach mankind their religion. And why do they say that this is the operative portion of the hadith? Because this is what ties everything that happened before together. That everything that the angel Jabril asked about, it encompasses the deen in totality. So, Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. These three things encompass the deen in totality. You hear people talk about, what are the three aspects of Tawheed and all that. We don't say that, Ahl Sunnah. We ask, what are those three things which are the deen is founded upon? Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. And Shaykh Uthman Dan Fodio, bad baby, what are you doing? And Shaykh Uthman Dan Fodio, in his book, he talks about this particular hadith, and he says that from this we gain the understanding that the deen is founded upon those things that the angel asked upon, and that it has a foundation and it has two branches. And we've talked about this numerous times. As for the foundation, it's Iman. It's Iman, right? Our beliefs. These are the things, you can't become a Muslim without having the proper beliefs, right? You have to know what to believe about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to know what is impermissible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to know what is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to know about the angels. You have to know about the books. Also as a foundation, it's the only thing that can help, that can exit you from Islam, is having the corrupt beliefs, like some of the groups of the past have had. Holding beliefs about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he exists in some place, that he possesses body parts, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is somehow restricted in his attributes, and so on and so forth. And the two branches are outer and inner, and we've discussed this numerous times. The outer branch is what? Somebody tell me. Okay, simple as that. Sum it up in one word. In one word. Islam. Islam. The outer branch is Islam, because those things are the five pillars. These are all outward actions. A person, you take Shahada in front of people. Why? Only so that people can recognize you as Muslim, so that you can get your rights as a Muslim, right? But people can take Shahada. We look around the city. We know from history, Abdullah ibn Ubay and his followers, they professed the Shahada, but it didn't reach past their heart. They had the outward manifestation of Islam, but it didn't reach their heart. You make salat. This is the outward action. A person can go through their life making salat and it just be exercise for them, and it doesn't penetrate. You can pay zakat. You can fast on Ramadan. You can make hajj. All of these are outward actions. And the inward part is ihsan. Ihsan, or purity. And the science which helps exemplify ihsan is tasawwuf. Some people don't like that word. Some people like to say al-musir or adab or whatever, but tasawwuf. Meaning putting your heart, or purifying your heart, so that your heart is in line with those outward actions. And you have to have something from all three parts of those things in order to be considered a Muslim in totality. That's all I have. So, any questions? I don't answer questions. Khalil can answer all of them. We see you, bro. You ain't invisible. Any questions? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Let's eat, brothers. Oh yeah, food sale over there. Buy this $7.